What's going on, guys? It's Illuminastic, and I made a poll in the community and asked you guys what I should like to stream about tonight, and Magic wins. So here we are to talk about Magic. The first thing I want to say is that when I say Magic, I don't mean you know amulets and spells and all this sort of stuff that may or may not be totally superstitious lunacy. Um, I am talking about methods of expansion of consciousness, of creating a dialogue with the universe in a way that is not really supernatural because there's no such thing. Preternatural may be a good way to talk about it. Um, but we don't use magic to do impossible things. We don't. I found a group today called like Suspend Logic, Believe in Magic. That is terrible advice. Um, so in this light stream, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about like the techniques and approaches. I'm just going to give a general kind of overview and explain what I think magic is and what it is not. And so one of the things that magic definitely is as Aleister Crowley defined it, the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. And so in order to cause changes to occur in conformity with our will, we must first discover what our will is, and that is where tools like psychedelics and meditation and ritual magic can come in really handy. Those catalysts are the primary tools, at least in my world, for approaching these things and creating a bridge between the conscious and the subconscious mind, and beyond that, a dialogue with the universal mind. And once you have accomplished this, greetings, SETI 10165, you experience synchronicities. You start to intuitively understand the meaning behind certain other types of coincidences involving numbers, for example. I want to mention also, while we're on the subject of these numbers, these strings of numbers that people, it's become a very trendy, popular idea. Um, it's Once something is sort of the genie's out of the bottle, it can be difficult to tell whether it's authentic or if it's just a trend and people are monkeys, so they just imitate each other. And um, I found an old interview of Maynard James Keenan from like 1992 or something. I mean, the internet wasn't even a thing then, and if it was in its absolute infancy. And he's actually talking about how, like, after people eat mushrooms for the first time in college or whatever, they'll start to notice that every time they're thinking about certain subjects, they'll notice certain numbers. And so I just wanted to mention that in case you're suspicious that this is just this trendy thing, and it's problematic, to have exposure to this information prior to having the experience, because once the idea is planted in your head, you don't really know whether you are just sort of seeking these things out or even projecting the experiences. So don't want to diverge too much, though. I will right away give you guys one of the most important secrets of understanding magic. And I think that this element of magic, as a sort of like subtle and complicated branch of physics, which is really what it is a real deterrent for people to embrace it and to really understand it properly. Um, and so if you really want to understand the fundamental mechanisms that allow consciousness to interface with experience in the way that a lot of matrix minded materialistic people might have problems entertaining, you have to study light and electromagnetism. Those things are the fundamental operating mechanisms of the universe, really, but certainly the way that our consciousness interfaces with the energy in the universe around us. A really interesting subject to kind of delve into is how the pineal gland actually works. And of course, a lot of it's sort of conjecture, it's theoretical, but my experience was that I sort of theorized about this stuff and then did research and was able to confirm it, which, by the way, is one of the great benefits of the expansion of consciousness and the practice of ritual magic and the consumption of psychedelics and plant medicine, is that you will develop the capacity to intuit things, and the confirmations come right on the heels of these intuitions more often than not. People call this spirit guides, and you don't have to use that language if you find it offensive. I think that we can even understand it in terms of once we have locked our pattern deciphering mental mechanism onto some sort of pattern, we're able to then extend that into the future. And so uh, I I had started to think a lot about light and consciousness and electromagnetic waves and the pineal gland. And so I had an experience once with ayahuasca where I was able to see out of my third eye. I could see through my forehead, and it was a little bit orange, I think, because it was sort of having to penetrate through the blood in the skull. And um, but I did a bunch of rigorous tests with my eyes closed to really absolutely try to make absolutely positively sure that I was actually looking through my third eye. And, I'm sure you guys are aware that the pineal gland is associated with the sixth sense and that sort of thing. And so the next morning when I went downstairs, the first thing the shaman said to me when he saw me was, sometimes you can see through your forehead when you take the medicine, not hello, here's breakfast or whatever. So really interesting, but it got my gears turning. And so I looked it up and discovered that the pineal gland has rods and cones, and it's connected to the neovisual cortex. So it basically is a functioning eyeball. A friend of mine, we were talking about this, and he theorized that when you close your eyes and you have the eidetic visuals where you can still see stuff happening, whether it's it's psychedelics, these incredible visions like I had just last night with ayahuasca. Really, really tremendous. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about that after we plow through some of this magic stuff. Um, nice, Charles. Well, the thing is, every time you do something consciously, you're performing magic. Every time your consciousness directs matter to move, if you're wiggling your hand, you're moving your eyes, you're having a thought, all of that is an act of magic. To do anything consciously is to work magic, because magic is just the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. But back to the pineal gland. So I discovered that, yes, it sounds like it is biologically feasible that the third eye could actually be a functioning eyeball. Um, and so I did some more research, and I discovered that the pineal gland inside of the sac is two piezoelectric calcium carbonate crystals. And piezoelectric really just means that something is rubbing and creating a frequency. And so the consequence of the rubbing of these piezoelectric crystals they're a little bit different size, so that means that they're going to create an out of phase wave. And my theory about that is that the information that is transferred from our consciousness to the energy around us, to the universe at large, is that is the physical mechanism by which that transfer occurs, right? These out of phase waves are carrying information via these electromagnetic waves, the brain waves, and they're sort of etched like a record or a CD, is by these waves. And so, when I talk about magic as a natural science and another branch of physics, I think that approach of really having some sort of mechanistic understanding of how this stuff works, why it works, it can inform you of the limitations of it, because that is the biggest mistake that a new magician makes, right? To believe that his magic can do more for him than it can. When people start to have precognitions, when they start to have well, particularly precognitions, you start to believe that everything you think is a precognition and get yourself into all kinds of trouble. Or, you may successfully have some like super powerful revelations that are even uncommon in their import. And then you start thinking that all of your thoughts are on this level, and you become megalomaniacal, and this ego inflation happens that's so common you see with spiritual people. Um, Yes, please do give the video a thumbs up. And don't forget that the retreats that we're having with ayahuasca and these other plant medicines will also get into Hermetic magic, the practice of the LBRP, and some other basic stuff. I mean, really, until you're proficient with the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the middle pillar, it doesn't really make sense to go any further with this stuff. So, unless you're coming to stay for a very long time, we'll mostly just work on perfecting that and talking about the philosophy, in addition to drinking ayahuasca with local indigenous shaman and going and playing with monkeys and all of this stuff that we do here. It's been absolutely fantastic lately. Okay, so um, yeah, and that's one of the main bullet points that I wanted to convey with this live stream, because the advent of blind, abject, absolute deterministic materialism, reductionist, ontology, is it has damn near killed the entire planet. It has given us a complete and total crisis of purpose. So people don't know why they're here, what they're doing. Life is meaningless. It's whatever you can get away with. You're the only person that matters. Solipsism is running wild. And there's more and more of this sort of narcissistic, existential nihilism kind of. That is like the postmodern philosophical bent of the mainstream of most of the world, I think. And in response to that, what we have is an equal and opposite reaction, which means that we're going way too far, way too fast in the opposite direction. And so rather than having genuine spiritual awakenings, and I'm not saying that isn't happening, but in many, many cases, far too many cases, what's happening is that people awaken a little bit, and then they let all the woo in, all of it, without any discrimination, without any what's a better word, discernment. And when the Buddha said, that discernment is one of the fundamentally important uh, um, skills that we can have in our spiritual practice, this is what he was talking about. You don't want to believe that chakras are real just because it says that in books. I mean, there's all sorts of things written in all kinds of books. Some of them are ancient. Ancient doesn't mean true. You know what I mean? So this is like the main skill that I would promote for people to develop, and not to be afraid to engage in critical thinking and to maintain your skepticism. If you overdo it, of course, it's self-defeating. But I think that we're really lacking in good teachers, because the profit motive is so huge, and because there are no real metrics for, people don't have a degree in magic generally. You know what I mean? It's really difficult to sort of evaluate who has a legitimate skill set here and who has just, learned a bunch of buzzwords and is, repeating them effectively so that they sound like they know what they're talking about. And everyone wants to escape the matrix. So you have this huge um, incentive for people to sort of even convince themselves, so that they don't have to feel like they're duping people and taking advantage of people, that they have the skills and the knowledge and the wisdom that really makes someone effective at helping someone else to wipe the webs and the dew from their withered third eye, uh, and really get on with it without becoming delusional, or without, having so much ego inflation that you get yourself into trouble. It's a really sticky swamp. It's easy to get lost in. So yeah. So another really valuable tip that I can give you is that a good way to think about this is just as the original unity, that some people call God or creator or source, or for me, it's just the universal mind, the sort of network of consciousness that permeates the entire universe. Um, just as that thing exploded and became all these splinters that are all of creation, I think the truth about what happened also did that. And if you guys have been following my channel and watching the Masonic live streams, um, the author Albert Pike of that book that I've been using, Morals and Dogma, talks about how man had the truth, but then he found error. And I do suspect that it's not so much actually that the truth was like exploded and disseminated into all these different groups. I think it's more likely that way back in antiquity, people just intuitively knew what happened and what we are, where we're going in this ocean of chaos. And um, and there has been occulting, which, by the way, occult actually means to hide, of this truth, and it has been sort of contaminated with falsehood and superstitions. And another way to think about it is when this ray of truth passes through an individual unit of consciousness, a human being, their gobbledygook, their ideas kind of get mixed up with it. And so it's our job at the current juncture to sift through all of this and to find the stuff that actually has substance and utility, and really learn to make investitures of this knowledge in our actual lives in meaningful ways that benefit us and all of creation. Because I don't know if you guys have noticed, we're in a lot of trouble, and the antidote to the atom bomb is consciousness, the evolution of consciousness, the expansion of consciousness. Um, but that doesn't mean just blindly believing a bunch of stuff that we find on the internet. We have to understand the value of gnosis, and we also have to be willing, have the courage to develop the respect for this experience and the people, the purveyors of it. Uh, to understand that if you really want to be advanced in consciousness, it's no different in terms of your commitment and the amount of information that you need to absorb, and your determination and willpower must be equal to that of a physicist, or a biologist, or whatever it is. This is a lifelong commitment, and it really requires um, diligence in your ability to evaluate information and to be objective about your own experiences. The idea that we can influence our reality with our thoughts is so tempting. It's very easy to sell people. So there's just a tidal wave of garbage systems that are trying to convince you that you can manifest whatever you want just by thinking about it. And yet these people are putting an awful lot of time and energy into creating courses and books, and if you really pay attention, like they don't really seem to be manifesting exactly what they want, unless they're just talking about the debit from your bank account that has gone into theirs. Um, you know what I mean? It's really easy to sell people stuff that they want to hear. And the thing is that it is true that the cultivation of our consciousness and the development of um, sort of extrasensory perception, it's legitimate, it's real, it happens, and there are benefits. But if you're really talking about getting to the point where you're able to just live in your dreams and manifest whatever reality you want, it's going to take a lot of dedication and commitment and a lot of courage. And I think that we live also in an environment of toxic positivity. So people have really become disconnected with even their ability to look at something and say, I don't think that's good, or that doesn't make sense, because there's this sort of narrative that we, have to be just positive and accepting of everything under the sun, and that is not it's not how it works. If you have an entire diamond mind, it's 99% cold, and that is a reflection of the substructure of the rest of the universe, basically. Okay, but I was talking about the systems that actually have some real utility, and that the truth is self-substantiating, right? So if you find something that actually does have this connection to this, deeper universal mind, that is a tool for genuine mystical revelation, it will prove itself, right? Uh, Success is proof, you know? So the Kabbalistic tree of life is one such system. It is loaded with utility. And, I don't have a ton of time tonight, so I'm going to use this example to really show you guys how this works. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to try to condense a bunch of information into a single point. This is really one of the great secrets of magic, the repetition of this process of systole and diastole, expansion and contraction. The universe began as nothingness that became aware, and that created the division that resulted in the replication of these structures. And that process continues until every possibility that could be fulfilled without violating any of the laws of nature, right? Once you reach that point, it collapses back in on itself. And the physical way that that happens is that the light consumes itself, basically, and the matter all sort of falls back into the singularity, and it all starts over again. This is an idea that I've had for a long time. It's why this phoenix is so important to me. The phoenix process, I talk about how I've made videos about that whole experience in my life that I think are have some utility. If you guys haven't seen the Phoenix process video, check it out. Click on 1111. It's not an editing trick. People don't believe me, but it's true. I would never have thought to just check it out. Look at the Phoenix video. Click on 1111. And it's not the only occasion of something like that. So to stay on point, though, collapses back into the singularity, blows up again. This is called quantum loop theory now, and it is increasingly popular amongst physics. This idea that the universe is basically a phoenix that recycles itself in exactly the manner that I just described, and the Kabbalistic tree of life actually has this concept built into it. The word in Hebrew is zintzum, and it is the process of contraction that occurs just after the nothingness. So you have the three veils of negative existence, and that was basically, you could think of it as the materialization of consciousness. So there was a nothing that is so nothing that nothing isn't even, there's no words that can even, you can't even call it it. You can't say it is nothing because it's so nothing that it doesn't even apply. And so with each veil, you have a little bit more substantiality, but we're still talking about some really subtle energy that is nothing but pure fundamental awareness. And then at some point, that energy contracted into a singularity that then broke through the veil. And the first sphere that was created is Keter, and this is the crown of divinity. But you could think of it as this awareness, that this thought, I am, right? Eheye in Hebrew, right? That's the crown of Keter, the first emanation. And then so as this bolt of consciousness moves down through the tree of life, from Chokmah, which is like wisdom and spiritual intellect, and also impulse, and all of these sort of masculine energetic consciousness ideas. Then it goes over to Bina, and we also have now light and darkness. We have the feminine and the masculine. And so Bina is like the spiritual Kori, the feminine, giving form and substance to the conceptualization of this masculine energy, right? And so this without going through all the spheres, basically this thing zigzagged through and created, this, like, the middle pillar is another expression of this ritual where there's the feminine, dark, all of this stuff in the one pillar, and then the white pillar, and then the person is in the middle trying to harmonize all this stuff. And Tiferet, which is the Hebrew word for the sixth Sephiroth and the solar plexus. And so, anyways, all of this energy eventually crystallizes in Malkut, which is matter, and the foundation at the bottom. But in each one of these Sephiroth, you also have all these other attributions, and then there are paths, right, that connect these Sephiroth. But in the Sephiroth, you have a planet, you have a Hebrew letter, you have different archangels, and all of these things are symbols. And when you pack them all into these spheres, what you are eventually able to do through the process of meditation and understanding these correspondences, right? If you guys look through occult literature, good occult literature, there are constant references to these correspondences between all of these ideas and all of these symbols and metaphors. And the reason that you're doing that is that the symbols allow you to compress information into a point. Just as the universe collapses into a singularity and then explodes again, you are taking energy in the form of information and compressing it into a sphere. And you're able to process a tremendous amount more information by compressing all of this. The same idea applies to sigil magic, right? That's really what it's about. Or the magical squares. If you're not familiar with well, they're magical plates, I guess. They're really, really complicated looking, sort of like magical squares. You guys can look it up. But they're basically like QR codes, right? To change your consciousness. Just like you scan a QR code, a specific one, and you get certain information, a certain connection between, your phone and the CPU in your phone. The same thing happens when you scan these plates with your brain. It's the same exact thing. Um, but anyways, the ability to compress all of this information into a single point is embodying the only process that's really happening in the universe, this expansion and contraction of information or energy. It's really the same thing. And so there's a tremendous amount of power in embodying these universal processes. Um, this is why the Tao was such a powerful teaching, and Freemasons are basically Taoists that actually use their knowledge of these natural systems to do stuff rather than just observing. Um, so that's a huge clue. Even the Hebrew alphabet. This is why it's used in the Western occult tradition so universally. It already has this triune meaning or layers of meaning built into it, because every Hebrew letter is a glyph of something. So Gimel is a camel, Dalet is a door. They're all a bet is a house. Um, so they're already a letter, a glyph, and then they're also a number. So you have three layers of functionality and meaning in each of the Hebrew letters. And then, so you take a Hebrew letter and you put it in conjunction with a certain planet. And with that planet, you also have this concept that is embodied in the Sephirah. And so these relationships between these related ideas that aren't quite the same, they're related, but they're not identical, right? So then you're building like this little miniature universe of geometric relationships in the substructure of this sphere, right? And then you are able to connect them through these paths that also have these symbolic relationships. And then you can take one subject with all of these different details and create a tree of life, pack all of this information into it, compress it into a singularity, and then once you have a bunch of these spheres in your consciousness, you can keep compressing and compacting all of this information, and you're training your brain to do this constantly with everything you see, everything you encounter, all of your experiences, to create these miniature universes, collapse them into a tiny point, and then that process of condensing this energy causes this cataclysmic explosion that gives birth to a new universe of ideas, a new universe of being. And so that is just one example of how magic and these symbols and this all of this stuff actually yields changes in consciousness that have the effect of liberating you from your mind forged manacles, your limiting beliefs, and allow you to transcend old patterns and enter into a new relationship with yourself and with existence. So, if you guys have any questions, how long have I been talking? I mean, really, I kind of feel like I made my point there. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything, I'll be happy to field them. Also, please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. Come and see us at our retreat. It's been absolutely amazing to get to show people the jungle and watch them fall in love with it, and to really, I mean, if you've never seen the Amazon rainforest, you just don't. There's just no way to wrap your head around it until you're in it. And also, as much as I hate to say it, the deforestation, the clear cutting is creeping closer and closer. It used to be true that I could go down the road and not see it, or I could go all the way to Tenna, the nearest city, and not see it. And now that's no longer true. It's really crazy. They really are cutting the Amazon down. And so I really feel compelled. It is my will to convince people to come here and see it and fight the deforestation and to support the indigenous communities here. Um, it's really crazy. There's still a lot of exploitation of the indigenous here, which is something I'm trying to fight. But unfortunately, the only way that we can fight is to have money. Money is the energy that facilitates action, right, on this plane. Some of the rules of existence are not dictated by us, but they are dictated to us. And so that's part of the give and take of existence, right? We do have tremendous amount of power, and we can use the laws of nature to rise above circumstance to a certain extent, but we are still bound to certain restrictions that are dictated to us by a natural law. And it manifests in all kinds of glorious and horrifying ways. Totally a mixed bag. Um, So, where were we at with all of this before? Okay, yeah. So you guys can make one-time support in the description. There's Zelle and PayPal, and it hasn't happened in a while. So if you guys want me to keep making this content, um, very helpful if you support us. So okay. So the Kabbalistic tree of life. There's a reason it's so ubiquitous. It really is a tremendously powerful tool. Another thing that I can offer that probably will help a lot of you guys out is to, be careful about accepting other people's ideas. One good example is the inverted pentagram. People are convinced that it's, evil. It's a satanic symbol. Actually, not true. It's a symbol of the descent of light into matter. So if you think that existence and life, if you have this that type of Gnostic belief that we're trapped in this demiurgos' matrix or whatever, then sure, the inverted pentagram is evil. But it's really just a symbol of the descent of light, spirit into matter to animate it. And then with the point upwards, it is a symbol of the redintegration of matter back into spirit, which is also, and this is one of the most extraordinary things about really developing a deep understanding of the symbolism of the Western occult tradition, um, while keeping an eye on developments in science. Because what you realize very quickly is that we are capable of intuitively understanding the deepest mechanisms, the original catalyst, where the universe came from, why it exists. And I think that when we have these organic processes, when we have these revelations by way of internal process, gnosis, direct personal subjective gnosis, and then we see the confirmations in science that these things have been confirmed by physics, and that they have clearly and obviously been known by ancients for thousands of years. Um, it really is empowering. It is liberating, and it really helps us to cultivate a healthy relationship with doubt. Um, Doubt is not an enemy. It makes excellent mistress, but a terrible wife. Um, it's certainly not the kind of enemy that faith is. If you drink and dance all night with faith, you will wake up with a corpse in your arms in the morning. You drink and dance all night with doubt, and you will find her a virgin in the morning. Um, so it's an excellent tool, but you have to have the right relationship with it. And because of conditioning, which we're all subject to, we've all been affected by propaganda, we've all been affected by indoctrination. Um, we almost all of us have an unhealthy relationship with doubt. And so, these kind of experiences of having these revelations that are then discovered to exist externally. Another beautiful thing about symbols is that a lot of them can't be understood by the profane. This is something that the adepts and initiates of the mysteries and different traditions have been saying from time immemorial. But until you have these internal processes that allow you to decipher these things, you really don't understand what it means. And that's perfect, because it gives you an opportunity to elevate your consciousness. And then, just in the way that I made the analogy with the QR scanner, that happens with these symbols in your consciousness. Um, so, the title Modern Magic for this light stream, that's what I'm trying to get across, is that I think a lot of people are afraid, and we have been indoctrinated not to use critical thinking, not to have skepticism. It's either blind materialism or muddle-headed mysticism, becoming so open-minded that wind is whistling through your ears. There is a middle ground. You can actually have at least a pseudo-scientific approach to your spirituality and not have it disintegrate, which I think is what a lot of people are afraid of. That if you bring this sort of analytical approach to the table, that you are just going to disintegrate your spirituality. And I assure you that that's not the case. Truth is self-substantiating. It proves itself. And the truth is that the universe is consciousness. It's a conscious organism in some sense. And if you have created this dialogue with it, it will prove that to you in the most remarkable ways. But you have to be willing, if you want to have a healthy relationship with that, to second guess yourself, to analyze and evaluate your own subjective experience, to test things. That's the only approach that's really going to yield anything useful and pragmatic and meaningful and with real substance. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. It is incredibly encouraging and meaningful to have anyone spend any amount of time with me here, because I know how much content there is out there and how many content creators, and there's just um, so many choices. So thank you guys so much. If you can, come and see us. The medicine has been amazing. Last night, I I I I don't. There are no words really to describe these beings that you encounter. But at one point during the ceremony, I was just surrounded by these beings made of these tendrils of consciousness, I guess. It's like they're moving in a visible matrix of consciousness that is the most bright, vivid colors that you could possibly. There's nothing in this world that compares to it. And they kept kind of walking by me and turning around and looking, and I thought they were trying to figure out how to heal me. And then it turned out that they were actually sizing me up. And at one point, the Pachamama, people call her, basically said, I fully accept you. And there was this experience of like merging with the plant intelligence, and it physically felt amazing. Um, and that's really becoming routine. Another thing that is happening is that um, information, or I guess guidance, that is offered to us during ceremony is manifesting in um, the physical experience, the our regular world, our day-to-day existence, that is such an obvious correlation with something that arose during ceremony, that there's just absolutely no doubt that there is some sort of universal mind, some kind of consciousness that is able to anticipate our experience and provide confirmations in the physical world after the fact. And that has happened really consistently and such with such specificity that it is just fucking mind-boggling. So we will see you guys again soon, and I really do appreciate all of you guys. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon.